and the hurricane wind was coming mainly from the northwest, the first half of the hurricane, and we proceeded and got in this dredge boat that we had put up in this Hurricane Creek, and that's where we were during the hurricane. And then the top half, the dining room and the sleeping quarters that flew over just before the lull, and then we started moving down below where the machinery was. It was a suction dredge, so there was a lot of pumps and pipes and equipment, steam boiler and a place to put it was a wood burning steam driven dredge. So there was a lot of stuff downstairs and a fairly large working area. And some of the men that, as we moved downstairs, we got everything organized, and we decided that we'd have quite a while to prepare ourselves before the other half of the blow came. So I spoke to Ed Sharon, and I could hear people hollering and screaming, "Come help us, we're dying, there's people dead," and a lot of stuff. And it was a slick calm, the sandflies were biting, and you could hear a half a mile, you could talk. And I told Ed Sharon, I says, "These people want us over there, what should we do?" I trusted his decision, and he says, "See if you can talk to them and tell them to move up the island, away from the camp was." They said that a lot of the buildings was blown over and a lot of them was destroyed and so forth. So adjoining the barge, the dredge boat, we had a derrick barge, and so I climbed over on the derrick barge and went up the boom on the side of this boom. You had clamps on there, so you could go up to the top. And
yeah.
So I went up to the top of this boom, and they were about 12 by 12s, and right in the center they had two big pulleys for the 1.5-inch cable that operated. So I stood straddled the cable on top of these 12 by 12s, we'll say, and there was no wind, and I could see people like it was clear sky. There was no. So I hollered over there and told them, "I hear you, and we can't come because it's only in the lull of the hurricane and so forth, and go up the island and get away from this area, because when the water comes back, it's going to come from the ocean side." It was from the bay side the first half. So I could see them moving, and I was up there about 50 minutes talking to them, telling them what to do, and I could see this like ants moving up the island. I didn't realize that there was a water tank. They had built a siding off the main line when they built the camp, and we had a water tank on this siding. And as the people got up in that area, which was several hundred yards from their camp, I could hear this roar coming from the ocean. And I told Mr. Sharon, I said, "I can hear that wall of water coming, I'm coming back down." So I got back down and got secured and so forth. And the people going up the island, they got to the water tank, and the wind started blowing and the rain and so forth. So a lot of them got clustered on around this water tank. It was a place, and there were a lot of people that saved themselves by hanging on to the lee side of the water tank.
Is this a water tank on stilts up in the air, or was it something underground?
It was a railroad water car, and it had a platform around up above where it had a lower platform and then a higher one where you could walk around the top. And 3 veterans opened it up, the opening in the top, and got inside in the water for protection. And there was 50 or 60 of them got on that first platform underneath the other one on the lee side, and got out of the wake of the flooding coming from the ocean. And then when that high water flood came, that tidal wave, the water car was on the lee side of the ocean, and so the railroad, when the water came, the tides floated the rails, and the railroad turned over on both sides of the railroad on where the water car was, but the water car kept the rails from coming all the way over because it was blocked on. And there was one guy that was on the ocean side that had gotten underneath the ladder, and he was hanging on the ladder. So when the rails came over, it pushed the ladder against the car, and one round was across his neck and one across here, and two down on his legs. And after the hurricane, I found him in that position, and I knew where the tools was, and I cut one end of the ladder off. And if you ever tried to cut that kind of steel, it was awful hard. And once you got one end, you couldn't pull it off. I had to go find a long piece of pipe and stick on there to pry it away from his stomach and pry it away from his neck.
Was he still alive?
And he was in pretty good shape. As far as I know, he wasn't damaged. And then after I got him out of there, a little ways up away from the car, I heard another guy moaning, and the rails, he apparently was hanging onto a big rock. And when the rails came over and lodged against the rock, one rail was across his hand. And how are you gonna get that rail that weighs several tons? How are you gonna get that off this man? He was all right, but he was stuck. The rail was on his hand. So then I had to go back and go to where we kept our tools. I knew where the tool shed was, and I finally found a jack, a railroad jack, and I took it up there and jacked the rails up and got him out. He was in fairly good shape, but there must have been 60 or 70, or maybe more, that were saved due to the fact that we had the water car for protection.